and thank you for joining us today for the Office for the Prevention of Family and Domestic Violence monthly webinar. Today, myself and the managers, or a number of managers from the office, have all joined online to share with you an update on the work we're leading on and also some of the key priorities being progressed for 2024 by our office. Before I get started, I would like to firstly acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which we are meeting, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay my deepest respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I would also like to welcome those that are joining us from around the state today and pay my respects to the lands from which you are coming from today as well. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Amanda Fennell and I'm the manager of the team supporting the Family and Domestic Violence Task Force, and we're providing an update on the work of the Task Force today, including the design of the Lived Experience Advisory Group. So as many of you would already know, the Task Force has met on 3 occasions since September last year and has most recently held workshops on the 18th and 19th of January. One of those was a metro workshop and one online regional workshop. And they were focused on system reform and building on the 5 Aboriginal family safety strategy workshops convened by the Task Force late last year in November. So the system reform workshops were attended by over 80 stakeholders from across the community services, Aboriginal community controlled organisations and government organisations. And I'd just like to probably take this opportunity to extend our thanks to everyone who's online today, but who also participated in one of those workshops. January can be quite a tricky time to pull together things like that, and we really appreciated the attendance by so many people and the valuable expertise and knowledge that was provided throughout the sessions. So the overarching purpose of these system reform workshops was really to seek views on the key issues and actions to improve the way existing services and responses work across government to create better experiences and outcomes for victim survivors. There was 4 key focus areas really throughout the workshops, and that was risk assessment, risk management, information sharing and workforce development. So the workshops were led by Task Force members, Dr. Alison Evans, who's the Chief Executive Officer for the Centre for Women's Safety and Wellbeing, and Mr. Damien Green, Chief Executive Officer from Stopping Family Violence. A case study approach was used and provided a structure for the discussion about how the service system could be improved or changed to help improve outcomes for victim survivors. And there were a whole range of ideas identified for system improvements, and they were followed by an exercise to prioritise the proposed improvements. So the fourth Task Force meeting will be held this Thursday, the 1st of February, and the focus of this meeting will really be to provide members with an overview of the workshop and play back some of the outputs and the key themes for the Task Force members' consideration, and to inform decisions on the next steps to support system reform work and to really think about some of the practical and tangible ways to move forward. So moving on to the Lived Experience Advisory Group work. So again, as many of you will know, one of the Task Force priorities is to establish a Lived Experience Advisory Group, and that a group that will place the experiences and voices of victim survivors at the centre of policy and service design. The Department of Communities led the procurement of a consultant to assist in the design of the Lived Experience Advisory Group, and in December last year, Minister Winton announced the award of the contract to Quabup Consultancy. So Quabup Consultancy is operated by Miss Alison Scott, who is a proud Noongar woman and has worked in the family and domestic violence area for over 20 years. Miss Scott has also engaged Corrine Hamilton to assist in delivering the project. Quabup Consultancy are being supported by the Department of Communities and a working group which comprises representatives nominated by Task Force members to design the model for the Lived Experience Advisory Group. And this model will define the advisory group's purpose, role, membership criteria and operational processes. So for the first part of the project, Quabup have completed a jurisdictional scan and literature review and delivered the findings to the working group. They have now begun extensive consultation with people who have lived experience as well as sector stakeholders across the state and are collecting qualitative and quantitative information through these consultations. They are engaging people face-to-face in groups as well as through an online survey. The information collected will assist in achieving a number of deliverables to be delivered by March 2024. And these include a consultation summary report, a report describing options for a proposed operating model for the advisory group, and a draft terms of reference for the advisory group. So these deliverables will form consideration by the task force and ultimately government of the operating model for the advisory group. So some of you online today may have already been engaged in the consultations, but for anyone that would like further information about the project or to be involved either through the online survey or some engagement in face-to-face consultation, I'll put the details in the chat for Alison Scott and for the Task Force Secretary who can provide further information and in particular the link to the online survey. And then the final item I just quickly want to mention is the new investment of $72.6 million to strengthen responses to family and domestic violence announced by the Premier late last year. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes currently to get this money out, and we'll be able to provide you with a more comprehensive update and details in relation to this at the webinar in February. So that's all for me. Thank you everyone for your time this morning. I will now hand over to Selena Getley, who is the Manager of Strategic Policy in the office, for an update on the work of her team and some of her priorities for 2024. Thanks, Selena.
Thanks, Amanda, and Kaya, everyone. And also just to give fair warning, I'm getting over a head cold, so I've got every intention of getting through my update without coughing, so we'll see if I can meet that intention. So for 2024, I'm really focusing on the first quarter in terms of activities that we're progressing under the strategic policy stream. And just building off what Amanda was reflecting on in terms of the task force's activities with the Aboriginal Family Safety Strategy, there's a couple of key pieces that we're getting on with that are really about practical implementation of the strategy. And one of those relates to one of the measures that was announced by the Premier in November, which is a new grants program focused on Aboriginal family safety. And so, as Amanda said, we are looking forward to giving you a bit more detail about that in the February webinar, but the intention is that that grant program will be aligned to the strategic focus areas of the Aboriginal Family Safety Strategy, and will be conducted through an EOI process. So we're looking forward to standing up that new measure as a key implementation piece for the Family Safety Strategy. Alongside that, we've started a piece of work with Jalara Consulting on developing an Aboriginal healing framework focused on responses to family violence. And so that piece is really in an early stage of establishment. And the purpose is that we will, as a key implementation tool of the strategy, will develop up a healing framework to support services in their work with Aboriginal women, children and families. And we're intending that to go out to targeted consultation in March. So at the moment, it is really at the setup stage. And what we're hoping will be an output of that particular project is a healing framework as a resource that services and communities can use to keep the focus on a healing focused approach to working with Aboriginal families, and also supporting Aboriginal community controlled organisations with that work. So we're really pleased that those two particular measures really focus on practical implementation of our state strategy. Then another piece of work that the office is responsible for is in partnership with the Department of Justice, developing the state's first sexual violence prevention and response strategy. We've over 2023, the last half of 2023, there was an active consultation on a draft strategy document and really strong engagement across the state and into regional communities. And so we've now got a final draft strategy from our partners who've been working with us on on this document, the Australian Institute of Family Studies and their consortium partners. And so we're taking that particular document and testing it with government agencies and other key stakeholders to see what else we need to contemplate in terms of finalising a draft strategy document for government's consideration. So the sponsoring ministers are the Attorney General, the Minister for Women's Interest and Minister for Health. So we've got work to do in terms of making sure the strategy reflects a whole of government approach to sexual violence prevention and also responding to sexual violence. And that work has been happening alongside the work that the Department of Justice through the Office for the Commissioner for Victims of Crime has been leading on reviewing the criminal justice system in terms of responses and support to victim survivors of sexual assault. So again, the first quarter of this year we'll have a lot of intense work to do on that particular project. I just also wanted to share a fair bit of work that is coming from the national policy context on women's safety, and particularly under the National Plan to End Violence Against Women and Children. And there's some key pieces related to Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander family safety and also to sexual violence. So I'll just touch on those and we'll make sure that you've got links to these particular initiatives in the chat to look at them in more detail. But the Commonwealth's currently running new grant programs focused on Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander family safety, and I'm just looking at my notes. These are 4 new grants that have been stood up, and submissions close middle of next month, 16th of February. And the 4 areas that the grants cover are increasing capacity of community-led men's wellness centres for First Nations people, community-led prevention services, programs and campaigns for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, increasing the capacity of crisis accommodation services for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and family, domestic and sexual violence programs in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community-controlled organisations. So those grants, in terms of stakeholders in WA, we've worked with our colleagues in the Department's Aboriginal Outcomes Division to make sure that the Aboriginal community-controlled organisations and businesses on their database are aware of those grant programs, given it's quite a bit of new investment from the Commonwealth in this area. Another key policy development is that the Commonwealth has stood up a steering committee to develop the First Nations National Plan. This was a key commitment of the Commonwealth under the National Plan to End Violence Against Women and Children. And that steering committee will be guiding the development of a standalone First Nations national plan on family safety. So another critical policy piece. And they had the steering committee had their first meeting last week on the 24th of January. And at that time, the Commonwealth Minister announced the non-government members of that steering committee. It's a government and non-government membership. And the WA non-government representative is Associate Professor Hannah McGlade from Curtin University. So it's a big task that steering committee has ahead of it, and our understanding is that the intention is that group will play a key role in guiding the development of this new national plan. Then finally, I just wanted to end on another key policy framework that the Commonwealth has released this month, again focused on sexual violence, and it's the Commonwealth Consent Policy Framework promoting healthy sexual relationships and consent amongst young people. And this is the first time this framework defines the concept of consent, and is encouraging consistent and unified messaging around consent and healthy relationships. So that's another key policy outcome, and it's intended for use by governments, education providers, workplaces, sports clubs, religious organisations, disability providers, caring facilities. So broad application, and good to see some more work going on in the sexual violence prevention space. So that's it from me, and I'll hand over to Fiona.
Thank you, Selena. That actually sounds really like you've got a lot of opportunities ahead for the whole sector. So it's really exciting news. The FDVRT Central Support and Coordination Unit, or FDVRT Central for short, are focused on three main priorities, or three phases of work, and you might have heard me speak about them before. Phase 1 is looking at really building some robustness and some like working on the foundations of the FDVRTs and bringing them together so that we're very consistent in our approach, but also able to manage place-based responses. So in phase 1, particularly at the start of the year, so the first half of this year, ongoing throughout the whole year, but really our focus to start off with is really getting into that workforce development approach for our FDVRTs, so induction package, and then specific training for each of our partners in the FDVRTs, and bringing the whole package together. So we're working with learning and development with that, and each of our sector partners to build something very meaningful that is consistent across the state and contemporary. So we'll be consulting with you very soon for that delivery. We'll also hopefully very soon be able to deliver you the updated FDVRT operating procedures. Last year, many of you would have been involved in the consultation and the changes, and that, as we know, there's as we've grown, there's been some grey areas in the existing FDVRT operating procedures. So we're hoping that we have considered all of those grey areas, and they'll be a lot more comprehensive. So we're looking forward to delivery of those. And as part of phase 1 as well, we're very keen to continue our work on improving the existing databases for FDV RT operations. So we've got the FBIR triage application. We have some other applications. We've got SafeNet for the FDV hubs, IMS for police. There's many different applications. We'd really like to bring them together in a consolidated effort and take the heavy lifting off a lot of our partners when we're dealing with it, because technology's really come a long way, and I think there's a lot that we can leverage out of existing technology. We're very excited to be trialling a MACM database very shortly. So we'll be with our family safety officers, we'll be trialling a multi-agency case management database, and we're going through a procurement process to try and find a better number of solutions or opportunities to select from for improvements to databases and technology as a whole across the FDVRT. So watch that space, and we'll be consulting very closely with you to make sure that whatever we choose meets everybody's needs as best as possible. So phase 2 is the continued rollout of the family safety officer roles. Last financial year, or this current financial year, beg your pardon, we've been really happy to deliver 14 new positions in 7 FDVRTs for the family safety officers. And this first phase of the implementation schedule for the family safety officers has been about lessons learned. So it has been really well consulted and well thought out, but just like best made plans, we're going to have some hurdles along the way. And so our family safety officers have been speaking to us weekly and giving us some really important lessons learned. Our partners have been delivering lessons learned, and so we're really excited to go into the next phase, so year 2 implementation rollout, and we'll go into recruitment very shortly. So we'd like to be ready for July for the rollout for the second phase. We are considering bringing the third year implementation through to the second year, but we'll see how we go. So we had such a great response in the first year. We had some excellent people, excellent candidates to choose from. So we're very excited to roll out the second year. and provide some really well-needed support for those FDVRTs that are supporting people that are experiencing the highest risk of high harm in their families. And phase 3 is financial stability for our FDVRT partners. We're very keen to progress this further, and we're partnering with the FDV task force with this. Finally, overall, we have a consolidated effort to increase perpetrator visibility and engagement. So everything that we do, we hold that lens throughout. So they're our priority deliveries for 2024. Thank you very much for the opportunity to deliver these to you, and I'll pass over to you, Stacey.
Great, thanks Fiona, and hello and Happy New Year, everyone. I'd like to give an update from the System Reform and Innovation team. And as many of you probably be aware, we have some procurement processes that are underway at the moment. The key one being the frontline support workers for that services applied for. We had a great response to that. It is going through its procurement processes now, so is in confidence, but I would like to acknowledge all the organisations that put in their applications and thank you for that. I think we'll be grateful for those additional resources in the sector when the process is finalised. Two other pieces of work that we've probably spoken about for some time now, but they will both be delivered in the first half of this year as soon as we get them through. One is the Code of Practice. So this is a piece of work that's been undertaken by the Centre for Women's Safety and Wellbeing and the Department, with a wonderful consultation process that went with that work. And what we will have is a foundational document that we haven't had in WA before that really talks about that practice and standards for services providing support to women and children. So it's been a very comprehensive process, as it needed to be, and it's going through its final stages now of completion. And the other big piece of work that has also needed time to really make sure that it meets the needs of what it needs to is the primary prevention framework. So emerging work in WA, but there will continue to be the focus, as there needs to be, on primary prevention. So once again, it's going through its final checks and approvals and then design. And once again, that was a very comprehensive piece of work that was undertaken with the Centre for Women's Safety and Wellbeing. So I'm excited for those two pieces of work to finally be delivered and to be those foundational documents for the sector. Just building on Amanda's update from the task force, and we know that there's a lot of funding that will be coming out. Part of that will be building on the primary prevention grants that we currently have in the sector. So that's, once again, is great to keep that momentum going with the sector and looking at primary prevention around family and domestic violence. So that will be another piece of work that we will certainly be starting as soon as possible. As far as commissioning, the team has a big role to play in the commissioning space and working with the sector. We had the workshops with the Safe at Home program, and I think what that shows is just how invaluable it is to be able to be in the same room, talking to our providers, discussing contracts, looking at how that service delivery looks. And we are really planning on building on that this year. So with contracts that have an end date over the next 2 years, we will be working closely with our contracting area to make sure that the overall investment for family and domestic violence is contemporary, that the contracts and specifications meet today's operational world and are supportive of consistent quality service provision. We want to look at making sure that all the components of service delivery are working together in the way they need to. And if we think about the continued investment that's coming into the sector, I think that's an extremely important part of the work, that as money rolls out into the sector, we need to be mindful that, you know, we have to look at the whole and not just parts of it to make sure that all parts of the system are working for the outcomes we want. We'll be looking at that this year. We'll be looking at contract management. So it's a piece of work that it always needs to be ongoing, live and contemporary. And we work very closely with our contracting division around that. So that's another part of the work that will have a high priority this year. And always looking at ways that we can effectively measure and understand what's being delivered. So there is a piece of work that's happening with the Australian Institute of Health and Wellbeing around making sure we can capture family and domestic violence measurements in that collection. But it's also something we really need to pay attention with our progress reports and any other way that we can collect information that provides a meaningful look at our service delivery. So they will be pieces of work that we will make a high priority this year and are really constant pieces of work that need to be happening all the time. I'll be able to give you a further update on human outcomes at the next webinar and have some exciting announcements around that. So thank you. I'll hand over to you, Rachel.
Thanks, Stacey. Good morning, my name is Rachel Biffin. I'm the Manager for Strategic Policy and Practice and wanted to take the opportunity to provide an update around some of the internal practice work that's happening in the Department of Communities. So we were very fortunate during the 16 Days in WA campaign to host Jackie Ruck, who is the Asia Pacific Regional Manager from the Safer Together Institute. Jackie is an Indigenous woman from the far north Queensland region and was one of the first Aboriginal certified trainers to do her certification in the Safer Together model. Department of Communities engaged Jackie to commence some conversations around localisation of the Safer Together model in WA's context. And she was very fortunate to deliver a number of dedicated webinars to child protection and housing staff, engagements with Aboriginal staff, senior practice development staff, and also visiting some of our staff and stakeholders in the regions. Jackie spent some time in Geraldton and also visited Broome to meet with Department of Community staff and stakeholders to discuss localisation of the Safer Together model and ensure that it's culturally safe when working with Aboriginal families. I would like to take the opportunity to extend my thanks to the stakeholders in both the Mid-West Gascoyne and the West Kimberley that met with Jackie and attended one of her workshops. Your contributions were invaluable and we really appreciated the reflections around communities' journey to become more family domestic violence informed. In terms of our certified trainers, Communities is proud to announce that we have an additional 23 certified trainers that have become accredited to deliver the Safer Together training. Jackie very kindly hosted a workshop for our certified trainer group. And we now have some place-based representation across the regions, so Safer Together training can be delivered across the state. We are also in an ongoing partnership with Stopping Family Violence, who are delivering group supervision to our certified trainer group, running regular communities of practice, again, to come together and discuss localisation of the model in WA and also opportunities for implementation across our agency. Communities has an ongoing partnership with the Safer Together Institute around implementation. As some of you may be aware from previous presentations, the Safer Together model and its critical components and principles will underpin the One Community's Family Domestic Violence Informed Practice approach, which is one of the priorities for my team this year. Safer Together training has been centralised from the 1st of July 2023, and this will continue with the ongoing delivery of the 4-day core training happening statewide. This is one of our interim training strategies while we work on a broader workforce development strategy for community staff. This will largely be underpinned by foundational knowledge that all staff within communities need to hold and a tiered approach based on specialised role and responsibility. That's all from me, and I might just pass over no questions. Just give it a couple moments and see if anyone has any queries. In the absence of any questions, we've popped up the general office email that's available if you do have anything outside of this session. On behalf of the management team and the office, we'd like to thank you to take the time this morning to join us and listen to the updates from each team. Thank you again for your time, and we look forward to seeing you next time.